Learner-centered psychological principles or LCP from the word centered. It means siya ay nakasentro. Learner is nag-aaral. So it means ang mga nag-aaral ay nakasentro sa mga prinsipyong psikolohikal. Psychological is concerned with the process of human thought that affects an individual's actions, habits, and behaviors. It means psychological daw ay kanang naa siya may kinalaman siya sa proseso sa pag-iisip ng tao na nakaapekto sa kilos, gawi, at pag-uugali ng isang individual. That's psychological. Learner-centered is the perspective that couples a focus on individual learners, their heredity, experiences, perspectives, backgrounds, talents, interests, capacity, and needs. Ito daw ay nakasentro sa mag-aral, ang psychological. And dito din ay nakapananaw ng focus bawat individual na mag-aral. Daghan silang namana or nakaranas ng mga pananaw gaya ng talento, kakayahan at pangangailangan. Learner-centered is the best available knowledge about learning and how it occurs, and about teaching practices that are most effective in promoting the highest levels of motivations, learning, and achievement for all leaders. Ito daw ay best, from the word best, pinakamahusay na magagamit na kaalaman tungkol sa pagtuturo at kung paano ito nangyari. At higit sa lahat, ang pagturo ang pinaka-epektibo sa paglunsad ng pinakamataas ng antas ng paganyak. Tungod sa psychological, makamit nimo lahat ng mga kinakailangan, labi na tong mga leaders. What is learner-centered principle? Learner-centered principle definition is thus based on an understanding, pag-uunawa sa mag-aaral, of the learner-centered psychological principles as a representation of the current of knowledge based on learners and learning. Principles apply to all learners, lahat ng nag-aaral, in or outside of school, young and old, and they related to the beliefs, pagtuo, characteristics, katangian, and disposition, and practices of teachers. Mabata man o matanda, ito ay naugnay sa paniwala sa learner-centered psychological principles. At naugalian na ng mga guro ang learner-centered principles. When teachers and their practices functions from an understanding of the knowledge base denoted in the principles, they are
include learners in decisions about how and what they learn and how that learning is assessed. Value each learner's unique perspective. Respect and accommodate individual differences in learning backgrounds, interests, abilities, and experience. As D. Treat learners as co-creators and partners in the teaching and learning processes.
Hi everyone, good day. I am Navirus Wika Plaza and I am your first reporter. My topic is all about the first principle, which is the nature of the learning process. But before we'll discuss my topic, let's first find out what is learner-centered psychological principle. The learner-centered psychological principle. Why do we need to learn about the learner-centered psychological principles? Well, it is because teachers are expected and ought to be catalysts of both teaching and learning. And we, future educators, are the facilitators of the classroom. Thus, we must make sure to establish a classroom focusing on the learner's development and learning. Therefore, we must make sure that our teaching style is effective. Let's first tackle about learner-centered. So what is learner-centered? It is the perspective that couples a focus on individual learners, their heredity, experiences, perspective, background, talents, interests, capacities, and needs with a focus on learning. The learner-centered psychological principles pertains to all learners and the learning process, and best understood as an organized set of principles. No principle should be viewed in isolation and taken from the principles developed by the American Psychological Association. The following are the 4 factors of learning-centered psychological principles. The first one is cognitive and metacognitive factors. Then we have the motivational and affective factors, followed by developmental and social factors. Last, we have the individual differences factors. Finally, let's tackle about the principle number 1, nature of the learning process. Nature of the learning process. The learning of complex subject matter is most effective when it is intentional process of constructing meaning from information and experience. There are different types of learning process. For example, habit formations in motor learning and learning that involves the generations of knowledge or cognitive skills and learning strategies. Learning in school emphasizes the use of intentional processes that students can use to construct meaning from information, experience, and their own thoughts and belief. The successful learners are active, goal-oriented, self-regulating, assume personal responsibility for contributing to their own learning. In short, nature of the learning process means that a child undergoes new learnings by his or her own experience throughout the environments that are necessary to meet the demands of life. For example, while touching a burning candle, a child gets burned and he withdraws his fingers. When he faces a similar situation again, he withdraws his fingers faster. Let us remember that learner-centered psychological principles is essential to us as future educators because it is important that we know what we are doing. We should be guided so that our vision would be clear and not blurry. Our priority should be our student, and we must know that each student is different, unique, and special in their own ways. And that's the end of my topic. I hope that you've gained new informations or insights. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. This is Rafame P. Awas, a B.Ed student of Cebu Technological University, Barili campus. So my topic for today is about the learning-centered principle, which is the principle 2, goals of the learning process. This is the continuation of the reporting by Navarros Rica Plaza. Principle number 2, goals of the learning process. The successful learner, over time and with support and instructional guidance, can create meaningful, coherent representation of knowledge. So, Principle 2 is one of the cognitive and metacognitive factor. Actually, it has 6 principles in the cognitive and metacognitive factor. So, what is cognitive and metacognitive, by the way? So, cognition is a term of referring to the mental process involved in gaining knowledge and comprehension. So for the word cognition or cognitive, so we all use our mind. So the Cognition is the mental action or process of acquiring knowledge and understanding through thought, experiences, and the senses. The next one is metacognition. So metacognition plays an important role in our life, most especially as a student and a teacher. It helps us to be aware of our own learning process. Metacognition can be useful to us to guide us to our desired destination. We people have our own metacognition that is useful for us to study by ourselves. For example, for me, my metacognition as a student is it is effective for me to study and make my activity or outputs at night and when the deadline is near. So, we all people have our own metacognition. This is my topic for today. Principle 2, Goals of the Learning Process. The successful learner over time and with support and instructional guidance can create meaningful, coherent representation of knowledge. The strategic nature of learning requires students to be goal-directed, to construct useful representation of knowledge, and to acquire the thinking and learning strategies necessary for continued learning success across the lifespan. Students must generate and pursue personally relevant goals. Initially, students' short-term goals and learning may be stretchy in an area, but over time, the understanding can be refined by filling gaps, revolving inconsistencies, and deepening their understanding of the subject matter so that they can reach longer-term goals. Educators can assess learner in creating meaningful learning goals that are consistent with both personal and educational aspiration and interest. So, for me, as a future educator or teacher, I will create a meaningful student learning goals consistent with their personal and educational aspirations and interests. I will provide appropriate learning challenges and standards that can use a variety of strategies to help them reach learning and performance goals and to apply their knowledge in novel situations.
The third learner centered principle is called construction of knowledge. Construction of knowledge is an active process that involves the learners to socially and individually engage in the creation of knowledge. In this principle, it gives the learners the freedom to create new knowledge, reconstruct prior knowledge, connect new knowledge with prior knowledge, or redefine meanings from prior knowledge. This principle requires a combination of analysis, synthesis, evaluation, and interpretation from the learners in order to attain the learnings provided from the given task. When the educator gives an activity that requires the learners to create or formulate ideas or procedures in order to complete a certain task, it is also considered as construction of knowledge. This principle, the educator must create a task that involves participatory learning technique. It is a technique that organizes the classroom in order to motivate learners to participate in the act of learning. This technique gives the learners an opportunity to socially and individually engage in the creation of new knowledge in order to attain the required answer or idea in a given task. It also shows that this principle is more effective in an active social classroom. It gives the learners the freedom to share and engage knowledge with other learners. This way, the learners can negotiate understanding through interaction and varied approaches. This undergoes through a complex process of interaction with the learner's engagements with materials and experiences in life, knowledge structures, and a dialogue with peers and teachers in which new learnings or knowledge are developed. An example activity of this principle is group reporting, in which the learners share their ideas in order to create a concrete idea for the given task. As the process revolves again and again, it creates new knowledge to the learners, which is the concept of this principle, construction of knowledge.
Good day, everyone. I am Eunice Colicos from Grade 1B, and for the tackle for today is all about strategic thinking. What is strategic thinking? Strategic thinking is simply an intentional and rational thought process that focuses on the analysis of critical factors and variables that will influence the long-term success of a business, a team, or an individual. So, this sort of thinking must account for economic realities, market forces, and available resources. What is an example of strategic thinking? You can develop strategic thinking in your everyday life. For example, you go on a trip and pack our things, thinking ahead and assuming what you need to take in case of bad weather, an illness, losing documents, or money. What are the characteristics of strategic thinking? 4 key qualities of strategic thinkers. They are always learning. Strategic thinking skills are developed by committing to constant learning and self-improvement. They always seek advice from others. They are not afraid to take risks. They never forget organizational purpose. Why is strategic thinking important? Because the purpose of strategic thinking is to create a strategy that is a coherent, unifying, integrative framework for decisions, especially about direction of the business and resource utilization. Strategy is a key outcome of a relevant strategic thinking process. And so that's all for our topic for today. It's all about the strategic thinking, so you must thinking of your head and assuming everything. So that's all. Thank you.
The principle number 5 of the Learning Center Psychological Principles. What is thinking about thinking is all about? The thinking about thinking, the ability to change them. It is the step further than simple awareness of thought, process, and incorporating the ability to alter thought and behavior. Generally referred to as thinking about thinking, refers or was introduced as a concept by John Flavel, who typically seen as a founding scholar of the field. Thinking about thinking is the ability to plan a strategy for producing what information is needed, to be conscious in our own step and strategies during the act of problem. The major components of the metacognition are developing a plan of action, maintaining the plan of mind over the period of time, and then reflection and evaluating the plan upon its completion. Intelligent people plan or reflect on, evaluate the quality of their own thinking skills and strategies. We want students to perform well on complex cognitive tasks. We want students to connect their learning to what they know and what they do to know. This inner awareness of the strategy of thinking about your thinking helps students solve complex tasks. This program explores how thinking about thinking helps students better manage their own learning and learn difficult concepts deeply. So, for example, we can teach children to think about their thinking in ways that help them understand what they know and what they don't know, and what they like to learn, and to help them reflect on their learning and to evaluate their work against a continue that they are on.
Principle 6. Context of learning. So for the last principle of cognitive and metacognitive factors is principle 6, and that is the context of learning. So when we say context, it is the setting materials for the process to go on that can be influenced by the learner. So learning here is influenced by environmental factors, and that includes culture, technology, and instructional practices. And so, of course, teachers play a major interactive role with the learner and the learning environment. Cultural or group influences on students can impact many educational relevant variables, and students have different cultures, so they have different ways in learning, such as motivation, orientation towards learning, and ways of thinking. So technologies and instructional practices must be appropriate for learners' level of prior knowledge, cognitive abilities, and their learning and thinking strategies. When it comes to technology, when teaching elementary pupils, teacher will use laptop because children in this generation already knew this kind of gadget. Lastly, the classroom environment, particularly the degree to which it is nurturing or not, can also have significant impacts on students' learning. So, if you are an elementary teacher, you must put decorations in your classroom like butterflies, flowers, and something that is colorful and attractive because children easily captivated by colors and somehow they will be motivated to learn. And that is it for the context of learning.
Hey everyone, I am here to report my assigned topic, which is motivational and emotional influences. What and how much is learned is influenced by learner's motivation. What is motivational and what is the effect of this? So the effects of the motivation is normally for reaching because it increases an individual's energy level, determines the persistence in reaching a specific goals, affects the types of learning techniques used and individuals' thinking processes. For example, children who are motivated tend to be engaged versus longer, have, have better learning outcomes, and perform better than other children's on standardized achievements tests by Pinterest 2003. And that would be all. Thank you.
Learner-centered psychological principles. Principle 8. Intrinsic motivation to learn. The learner's creativity, higher-order thinking, and natural curiosity all contribute to motivation to learn. Intrinsic motivation is stimulated by tasks of optimal novelty and difficulty, relevant to personal interests, and providing for personal choice and control. Intrinsic motivation is the act of doing something without any obvious external rewards. You do it because it's enjoyable and interesting, rather than because of an outside incentive or pressure to do it, such as a reward or deadline. Curiosity, flexible, and insightful thinking, and creativity are the measure or lecture that the learners have normally. Intrinsic motivation to learn, which is in large part of the function of meeting basic needs to be competent and to exercise personal control. Intrinsic motivation is facilitated in tasks that learners perceive as interesting and personally relevant and meaningful, appropriate in complexity and difficulty to the learner's abilities, and in which they believe they can succeed. Intrinsic motivation is also facilitated on tasks that are comparable to real-world situations and meet needs for choice and control.
Principle 9. Effect of motivation and effort. Acquisition of complex knowledge and skills requires extended learner effort and guided practice. Without learner's motivation to learn, the willingness to exert this effort is unlikely without coercion. So, the last principle under motivational and effective factors is effect of motivation on effort. So it basically means that motivation is related to effort. It simply says that if you're motivated to learn intrinsically, there is a big impact or influence on the level of the effort that you have exerted. Because when we say motivation, it is the process that initiates, guides, and maintains goal-oriented behaviors. As a student, a learner, if you're motivated, you would extend effort on accomplishing basic or difficult learning tasks because you love what you are doing, so you exert more effort to learn more or to make it exquisite, and you always strive for excellence. Not only because you just wanted to pass that particular assignment or project that has given on you, but because you're into on that field, on that course. So of course, if you're into on something, you'll always make it beautiful and interesting. Even how hard it is or what challenges you may face ahead, it doesn't bother on you because that's what you want. However, if you are not willing to learn, you have no motivation, you will not exert any effort for it. You might keep on saying, I'll do it later, but you're just going to sit there the whole day and do nothing. Indeed, there is no effort exerted. So, this is how motivation affect effort in student learning. Developmental and social factors. Principle 10. Developmental influence on learning. As individuals develop, they encounter different opportunities and experience different constraints for learning. A person may encounter different opportunities that might have helped to learn more and gain more knowledge. It says that cognitive claims that children are naturally curious and use exploration to make sense of the world around them. They discover and adapt the world through exploration of what is unfamiliar to them. Learning is most effective when differential development within and across of physical, intellectual, emotional, and social domains is taken into account. Learning helps the individual to acquire the necessary skill through learning and knowledge so that it can achieve the set goals. If learning access in physical, intellectual, emotional, and social domains, it can be effective mostly.
What is social influences on learning? Learning is influenced by social interactions, interpersonal relations, and communication with others. Social influences comprises the way in which individuals change their behavior to meet the demands of a social environment. On the other hand, the social environment influences learning by creating a language environment and an experience environment which stimulate the mind to grow and by systematically rewarding a child for learning. The example of social influences, it takes a wide variety of forms, including obedience, conformity, persuasion, social loafing, social facilitation, observer effect, and peer pressure. There are the major factors of social learning. First, personal factor, and second, social factor, in which personal factors such as age, gender, and development of language influence learning. People of a young age have a good grasping memory necessary for learning but may have low concentration levels that affect their learning. On the other hand, old people may not have a sharp memory, similar to the young people, but have high concentration levels when it comes to learning. When it comes to gender, ladies pay attention for more as compared to gentlemen. Ladies have strength when it comes to languages and humanities, while men have strength in technical fields such as mathematics. Taken the social factors, such as peer pressure, affect learning in many ways. The type of company that a learner keeps influences their behavior, including the attitude towards learning. The educational background of the learners affects their learning abilities either positively or negatively. A learner with a good education background and foundation is likely to have it easy in all learning activities. But a learner with a poor educational background will have challenges along their learning journey and will need a lot of help to tackle the challenge. According to Harvard psychologist Herbert Tillman, identified three broad varieties of social influences. First, compliance. Compliance is when people appear to agree with others but actually keep their dissenting opinions private. Second, identification. Identification is when people are influenced by someone who like and respected, such as famous celebrity. Third, internalization. Internalization is when people accept a belief or behavior and agree both publicly and privately. That's all. Thank you.
Good day, everyone. I am Rindizal Tamara, and this is my topic in learner centered psychological principles. Since the learner centered psychological principles was divided into four, my topic was belong to individual differences factors. And this is the principle 12, which is individual differences in learning. Individual differences in learning is learners have different strategies, approaches, and capabilities for learning that are a function of prior experiences and heredity. It defines that individuals are born with and develop their own capabilities and talents. In addition, through learning and social acculturation, they have acquired their own preferences for how they liked to learn and the pace of which they learn. However, these preferences are not always useful in helping learners reach their learning goals. Educators need to help students examine their learning preferences and expand or modify them if it's necessary. The interaction between learner differences and circular and environmental conditions is another key factor affecting learning outcomes. Educators need to be sensitive to individual differences in general. They also need to attend to learner perceptions of the degree to which these differences are accepted and adapted to by verifying instructional methods and materials.
In Module 2, our topic is Learning Centered Physiological Principles or LCP. So, LCP has 14 principles. My assigned topic is in Principle 13, which is Learning and Diversity. Learning is how we learn or how to learn. Diversity is to understand that each individual is unique. So, I'll start my topic about learning and diversity. Learning diversity refers to the infinite variety of like experiences and attributes a child brings to their formal learning at school. All students with diverse learning needs to have a right to access a full and engaging education in the same basis as their peers. Catholic schools seek to empower learners by celebrating difference and providing educational opportunities aimed at eliminating discrimination and focus on growth and progress for all. So, teaching diversity learners begins with an argument of why society needs to embrace diversity in schools, especially schools in urban communities. In its
To ability, teaching diverse learnings argues that teachers need to understand their students to teach effectively and to create an atmosphere that encourage achievement. So we all know that there are different learning styles. So at the main learning style is the visual, auditory, reading or writing, and kinesthetics. And also there are 7 principles. So I'll give the 5 principles. So the first principle is encourage active learning. Second is give prompt feedback. Third, emphasize time on task. Fourth, communicate high expectation. And lastly, respect. That's the student's needs.
Principle number 14. Standards and assessment. What is the relationship between standards and assessment? Well, standards or goals are put in place for teachers to follow and set for students to achieve, while assessments are used in the evaluation process of ensuring that standards are being met. Standards ensure better accountability, holding teachers and schools responsible for what goes on in the classrooms. The practice of aligning learning to standards also helps ensure that a higher level of learning is attained, guides teachers in the process of assessment, and helps keep them on track. So, standards and assessment, setting appropriately high and challenging standards, and assessing the learner and learning progress, including diagnostic process and outcome assessment, are integral parts of the learning process.